Hello, and thank you so much for clicking and for watching this video. If you haven't done so already, why not subscribe, leave a like, and of course leave any thoughts, comments and feedback on this or any of the previous videos that I've previously posted. I haven't done a video for a couple of months because I've been off doing other things, working, writing, bits and bobs here and there, but I'm back now and I'm excited for the new season, excited for the start of the Premier League, which kicks off with Arsenal against Brentford on Friday night. I'm really looking forward to watching that game. Of course, a massive game. Manchester United play Leeds at Old Trafford. I'll be there for that. First time I will have been in a stadium, in a football stadium, since United lost to Burnley all the way back at the beginning of 2020 before the you-know-what happened. But today, I'm here to talk about my predictions for the upcoming season in the Premier League. Who's going to finish top? Who's going to finish 12th? Who's going to finish bottom? Let's find out. Welcome to my Premier League predictions video 21-22. So, my prediction for the team that will finish 20th this season is Watford. Now, they have made some good acquisitions in the summer. They've got Joshua King and they've got Danny Rose. So that is Premier League experience that they've brought into the club, which is going to be really important in their fight to avoid relegation. And they're sort of in a weird position because they're one of those teams that's good enough to be in the Premier League to get promoted from the Championship, but they're not at that level where they can stay in the Premier League on a consistent basis. And I think that's what you're likely to see from a team like Watford. They've got a young Spanish manager coming in. There is that history over the last few years of instability at the club in terms of managers, and it's a young manager that they've recruited, that they've got at the helm, and I just think it's going to be too much for them. I think they're going to have a couple of big results throughout the season, but I just think it's going to be too much, and I think Watford are going to finish 20th in the Premier League this season. Now, in 19th place, some people may not agree with me. Some people might think you're crazy. What are you talking about? They're an established Premier League team. But for me, finishing in 19th place this season in the Premier League, it will be Crystal Palace. Now, they have lost Roy Hodgson. He has stepped down as manager after 4 years at the helm at Crystal Palace. And stepping in is Patrick Vieira, who's had a small degree of success as a manager over in America. He was sacked from his recent club, Nice, after 5 consecutive losses. But I just think, like Watford's new manager, I think Patrick Vieira is going to lack that experience. And he's also lost a lot of players, like a lot of players with Premier League experience. And that is something I will be touching on throughout this video. Premier League experience is really important. This is the toughest league in the world. They've lost the likes of Van Aanholt, Andros Townsend's gone, Sacco. These are important players, and Crystal Palace have sort of been in that weird position where they've been an established team, but they've not really been progressing. They've just sort of been there. And last season they got off to a good start, but then they stumbled, had a few good results, got off to a great start with that win at Old Trafford, but I think losing that experience of Roy Hodgson as a manager, with him stepping down, that's going to be something that they're really going to struggle to deal with. And I think, a lot of people could say Roy Hodgson, as an older manager, they need a younger manager to come in, and they've got that in Patrick Vieira. Patrick Vieira's got a great pedigree as a player, but it's whether he can transfer that winning mentality that he had as a player into players now that he's a manager, and that's why I think it's going to be too much. I think the loss of experienced players that were just mentioned, a raft of other players as well, I think losing them, losing Roy Hodgson, and a new young manager coming in and trying to sort of kick on. There's not been much activity in the transfer window for Crystal Palace, not spent a lot of money so far. That could change between now and the end of the window, but the season kicks off for them at the weekend, and I think it's going to be too much. It's going to be a long season, and I think this is the season that Crystal Palace will return to the Championship. Okay, so in 18th place, it's Norwich City, but why? Well, Norwich City have had a poor summer in terms of recruitment. I don't think that Kenny Coker and Flynn Clark are going to be the kind of signings that Norwich City need to really kick on. I think Billy Gilmour is a positive. I think that it's going to be an important move for him. It's a loan move from Chelsea, but it's important because he's going to get minutes. I think he can get that experience, and for Chelsea, that's massive. And more importantly for him, that's massive because how likely is it that Billy Gilmour will get a lot of minutes, a lot of time playing in that Chelsea team this season? I think for him, a loan move is a positive. He's still playing in the Premier League. But I think for Norwich City, they're in a weird position, like Watford, really. You know, they've got that experience of being in the Premier League, and they're good enough to progress from the Championship. They can be fantastic to watch in the Championship, but in terms of the Premier League, have they got enough there within their squad? And strength and depth is something that you always hear people talking about when you hear people talking about teams at the higher end of the table, but it's massive for teams at the bottom of the table, and obviously they don't have the financial means to invest in more players. So they've got to be careful with how they spend the money. And as I say, I think their recruitment this summer has not been anything to really get excited about if you're a Norwich City fan or a neutral. You know, there's nothing within that Norwich City team that I look at and think, okay, they're gonna do something. I know they've got Pukki, but the last time Norwich were in the Premier League, he only produced 11 goals. Now I know he produced far more in the Championship last season. But you have to say, you know, is he at that level? Is he at that level, Pukki? And can he do it this season? He's going to need to get more than 11 goals. They're going to have to provide him with the service as well that he needs. So are they going to go out? Are they going to recruit more players this summer between now and the end of the transfer window? I don't think so. So I think Norwich City are going to finish 18th this season. They're going to get relegated. They're going to return to the Championship. They will return to the Premier League the following season and probably go through that whole cycle again, because it is a cycle with these kind of teams. Good enough for the Championship, not good enough for the Premier League. Next up, 17th place, it's Brentford. But why? Well, last year Brentford surprised everyone with their style of play, and in the end it was enough to give them that 2-0 win in the playoff final over Swansea. Much deserved, a fantastic season. I'm sure no one really expected them to be in that position, but they did it and they deserved it. They also reached the League Cup semi-final, having dispatched of sort of Premier League opposition along the way. They beat Southampton, they beat Fulham, they beat West Brom, they beat Newcastle, and eventually they lost to Tottenham in the semi-final. But Brentford will feel that they can build on those results over the next season, and they've got a really good young manager as well, young Danish manager in Thomas Frank, and he's worked with the Danish youth teams and Brøndby, and he's already proved valuable during his time at Brentford. So I think the likes of Rico Henry and Winston Reid are going to bring that sort of youth and experience to their defence when they're facing the likes of Harry Kane and Raheem Sterling and Bruno Fernandes. So this is a huge season as well for Ivan Toney, and as far as I know, he holds the record for the most goals scored in a Championship season. So it was 31 goals during the previous season. So they've got a progressive coach and they've got a good balance between youth and experience. And I think they will have enough to survive this season. I don't think they'll be blowing teams away, but I think they'll have enough in the tank to get them over the line. And I think they'll finish with a respectable amount of points, which will keep them in the league until the following season. Next up, in 16th place, it's Brighton. Brighton are one of those teams that are always teetering on the brink, but they never seem like they're in any real danger. And they're one of those teams that always seems to surpass everyone's expectations. How many times have we seen them put a run together and guide themselves to safety towards the end of the season? If Graham Potter can find players to provide Neo Maupay with the kind of service that he needs, then there's no doubt that he can improve on the 8 goals that he scored last season. And that in itself is the real problem for Brighton. It's the lack of goals, because in spite of all their efforts and an attacking brand of football, they need to add more goals to the game if they're to improve and to build on previous seasons. They should have enough to survive with the likes of Basuma and Lamptey and Trossard, but they still need cover should those key players pick up injuries throughout the season. I think Brighton will be okay, but I don't think it'll be a walk in the park. I think they will be okay though. Next up, in 15th place, it's Burnley. But why? Why have I chosen Burnley to finish in 15th? Well, Burnley have become a mainstay in the Premier League, and while some have criticised Sean Dyche and his teams for the physical style of football, it's not always pretty on the eye, it's hard to argue with the results, and this will be their 6th season in succession in the Premier League. And Burnley are a small club, so they've got less financial power than other teams. However, they've got these new owners, Velocity Sports Partners. They're now involved, and fans will be hoping to see investment and more of a steady progression over the following season. There's enough experience within the team and its coaching staff to maintain Burnley's top flight status for another season. I think after this season, though, with the new ownership, I think fans will be looking for more investment. But I think they'll be okay this season, and I think it'll be another sort of okay season for Burnley. Nothing spectacular, just okay, and just enough to see them retain their status in the Premier League. Next up, in 14th, it's Wolves. But why? Why have I chosen Wolves to finish 14th? Well, Wolves had a difficult campaign last season, and they lost key players the previous summer. They lost Raul Jimenez midway through the season after suffering that horrific injury, that fractured skull. And then the manager, Nuno Santos, he's also parted with the club at the end of the season, and now he's at Tottenham. And that's going to make this season really difficult. It's going to be something of a transition for the players, for the club. New manager coming in as well. There's plenty of talent in this squad. They've obviously got Ruben Neves and Adama Traore and Pedro Neto, amongst others. So there'll be plenty of questions that have asked of the new manager, Bruno Lage, who will be working to sort of build on the success of Wolves' previous manager. And Lage coached Benfica to the Portuguese title in the Super Cup in 2019. So Wolves' hierarchy will be hoping that he can bring some of that experience to a talented and hungry Wolves team. And based on the experience of the new manager and the talent within the squad, this should be sort of a smooth transition, although only time will tell as to where this team and its new manager go next season. Next up, in 13th place, here we go again, it's Newcastle United. Why though? Why? Well, at some point over the next season, you're likely to hear about how Newcastle were 12 points clear at the top of the league at the beginning of 1996, how they once beat Manchester United 5-0, and now they were involved in 2 classic matches with Liverpool in the mid-90s. And whilst nostalgia is nice, we all love nostalgia, it is also sickening, or it can be sickening. And it must be sickening if you're a Newcastle fan, because they haven't won a domestic trophy since 1955. And every season, we seem to talk about the lack of vision and the lack of investment from the owners. And Newcastle are always locked in an almost inevitable relegation battle. And towards the end of the season, they find a decent amount of form, and they survive. And you needn't go much further back than the end of last season, and they had the talents of Arsenal loanee Joe Willock, who catapulted Newcastle all the way up to a 12th place finish after scoring 8 goals in 14 matches. And Willock would be welcomed back to Newcastle with open arms by the manager Steve Bruce. And there is talk of him making it a permanent move for around £22 million. At least that's what I read yesterday. But Newcastle, they've also got the likes of Alisson Maximum and Callum Wilson at their disposal, which should be enough to steer them towards another comfortable, if not inspiring season in England's top flight. Next up, in 12th place, it's Aston Villa. Now, it's going to be difficult for Aston Villa to build on the success of last season, with their talisman, Jack Grealish, making that £100 million move to Manchester City recently. But there's still plenty for Aston Villa fans to be positive about, with the likes of Ollie Watkins and Matty Cash. They'll both be looking to build on their performances last season. But there was definitely a difference in Villa once Grealish picked up an injury last season, and that is something that manager Dean Smith will be all too aware of as he looks to push his team further up the table. And once again, they will have to do this without Jack Grealish. They're likely to have a comfortable season, but it'll be interesting to see if they can find a suitable replacement for Jack Grealish between now and the end of the transfer window. Aston Villa should be okay, but I don't think we can expect too much from them, having lost Jack Grealish so late in the transfer window. Next up in 11th place, it's Southampton, but why? Well, Southampton surprised everyone in the first half of last season by playing an attacking brand of football where all the players seem to have gone to a whole other level. They were fantastic to watch. I even made a video at the time saying they were the best team in the league right now. They were certainly taking advantage of other teams around them, the teams with more financial power, the bigger clubs, if you like, not being on top form. And I think Ralph Hasenhüttl, he briefly guided his team, guided Southampton to the top of the table. Now, whether it's brief or not, he guided them to the top of the table. But from December onwards, they took just 12 points from 20 games. And along the way, they even lost 9-0 at Old Trafford. Now, injuries absolutely decimated their squad, and the loss of key players like Yannick Vestergaard and Danny Ings, they played a major part in the struggles and the downfall in the second half of the season. A season that promised so much, a season that at one point saw them pushing for European football. I certainly thought they were going to be in serious contention for Europa League football, but they just fell apart because of those injuries and different things. So they'll be looking to find that early season form from last season. It's a really big season for Ralph Hasenhüttl and Southampton. I think they'll be okay this season, but I don't expect anything more than an 11th place finish. Next up, in 10th place, it's Everton. Now, Everton go into this season with another new manager after the departure of Carlo Ancelotti, who has returned to Real Madrid. And although it's hard to measure just how good this Everton team is at this moment in time, we have to give them the benefit of the doubt because there is so much instability at that club. Players coming and going, managers coming and going. They need to look at maybe their structure. They need to look at the way that they do business because it's just a mishmash of players and coaching staff at the moment. Carlo Ancelotti gets players in that he wants. Now he's gone. We've got Rafa Benitez. Are the players that Carlo Ancelotti brought in the players that Rafa Benitez would have wanted? And, prior to Carlo Ancelotti, there are other players there as well from other short-lived managerial regimes. Last season, Everton spent over 60 million on players alongside the recruitment of James Rodriguez on a free. And they did have a positive start to the season, but then they just lacked that consistency to sustain any kind of long-term challenge for Champions League football. A lot of people saw that as a genuine possibility. People saw them as genuine contenders for Champions League football because they'd got this new manager in, Carlo Ancelotti, the season before. Now they've got James Rodriguez, but they just couldn't put any kind of a run together. And they got some great results over the course of the season. They beat Tottenham, they beat Chelsea, they beat Arsenal. They got that long-awaited win, that victory at Anfield over Liverpool. But they still finished 8 points behind the Champions League places and 10 points behind Liverpool, who they had seriously threatened to finish above for most of the season. So they go into this season under the stewardship of the former Liverpool manager, Rafa Benitez, and that's caused massive controversy amongst large sections of the Everton fan base, and they'll be desperate to see their club win its first trophy in over 25 years, with the FA Cup being their last taste of silverware all the way back in 1995. And since then, they've seen so many managers come and go with little to no success along the way. But there are still positives for Everton fans going into this season. They've got the recruitment of Andros Townsend and Demarai Gray, and there's that classic mixture of experience and youth. I've really liked Demarai Gray for a long time. I'd like to see him get more regular first-team football, so this is a good move for him. And this is a squad that already includes Dominic Calvert-Lewin, James Rodriguez, Luca Digne, and they've all had good campaigns last season. But collectively, something was missing. Now, it's going to be difficult for Everton this season, and most would probably expect them to be competitive without posing any long-term threat to those Champions League positions. There'll be some highs along the way, but for the most part, it will probably be a similar story to previous seasons. Close, but in reality, too far away to cause any real concern to the clubs above them. It's a 10th place finish for Everton this season. Next up, in 5th place, It's Leicester City. Now, Leicester have fallen short of finishing in the top four on the final day of the last two Premier League seasons, and so this season they'll be looking to return to the top table of European football for the first time since they won the league back in 2016. Last season saw them defeat Chelsea to win the FA Cup, but losing out to Liverpool and Chelsea on the final day of the season might have overshadowed an otherwise successful season. In Brendan Rodgers, Leicester have a proven winner and enough experience to make this another good season for the Foxes. But with an aging Jamie Vardy and a lack of inspired transfer activity so far, fourth place may prove to be another step too far for Leicester this season. They'll push the teams above them, as they always do, but they're likely to miss out on Champions League football again and finish in fifth place in the Premier League. Okay, finishing in fourth in the Premier League this season, it will be Liverpool. Now, last season was supposed to be the beginning of a new era of dominance by the Merseysiders, but within weeks they'd conceded 4 goals at home to Leeds and 7 away to Aston Villa before losing Virgil van Dijk to injury at Goodison Park. From then on, they picked up numerous injuries and lost that air of invincibility at Anfield along the way, with losses to Burnley, Fulham, Brighton and Everton killing any chances of them retaining the title that they'd fought so hard to win over a 30-year period. But after a poor run of form, Jurgen Klopp's team will go on to win 8 of the final 10 matches to consolidate a third place finish. They'll be looking to build on their success at the end of last season, and they'll be looking to continue that form. But with other teams around them strengthening and the re-emergence of Chelsea as a title contender, it may be too much to expect Liverpool to find the kind of form that won them the title in 2020. How good will Virgil van Dijk be on his return, and will his presence be enough to rejuvenate Liverpool as legitimate title contenders? There's also the question of whether Mane, Salah and Firmino can rediscover the kind of form, the kind of pace and power that seemed to desert them last season. There were too many off days last year, and Klopp will be hoping that they don't carry that kind of form into this season. I expect Liverpool to improve on last season, but don't expect them to make a genuine push for the title. Thomas Tuchel turned Chelsea into European champions in just 6 months, but was it just a case of his team getting that new manager bounce, or are they now the real deal? Tuchel inherited a squad full of superstars and a team that had already progressed to the last 16 of the Champions League, but it will be interesting to see how his team functions with him at the helm for an entire season. Chelsea made the top 4 on the final day of last season, and whilst there is a lot to be excited about if you're a Chelsea fan, there will be those who are quick to remind those same fans that this Chelsea team shipped 5 goals at home to West Brom and struggled against the likes of Brighton and Leeds, with both games finishing in goalless draws. Chelsea are not the finished article yet, and it may be too soon for this team to take the title. In second place, it will be Manchester United. Manchester United will finish second in the Premier League this season. Now, Manchester United made huge strides over the course of last season, and whilst many will point to the lack of silverware as the measuring stick for success, there will be those who will be keen to remind people just where the club and players were before the arrival of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Old Trafford. Fan discontent dominated the headlines in the latter stages of last season, and whilst United fans will have no love towards the Glazers, fans will have been encouraged by this summer's transfer activity, which has seen the arrival of Jadon Sancho. There's also the imminent arrival of French international Raphael Varane to look forward to. Placing these players alongside the likes of Bruno Fernandes, Mason Greenwood and Harry Maguire will stand United in good stead, but still, United are perhaps a couple of players away from being considered genuine title contenders. Yes, they will push Manchester City, but the question is, how long can they push them for? City have 2 starting 11s, and perhaps it is the strength and depth and experience within their squad that will prove too much for United to overcome this season. United are much closer than they were last season, but it would take something special to prize that title away from Manchester City this season. United closed the gap from 33 points the previous season on the champions to 12 points, and if they can bridge that gap even more, then it will have been a successful league campaign. Okay, finally, in first place, finishing as champions in the Premier League for the 21-22 season this year will be Manchester City. But why? Well, Manchester City claimed their 3rd Premier League title in 4 years last season, and with the expected signing of Harry Kane seemingly on the cards, prizing the title away from them will prove a difficult task. They have enough experience within their ranks, and with so much strength and depth, it's widely known that they have 2 starting 11s. The emergence of Phil Foden last season was also a joy to watch, and with Raheem Sterling rediscovering his form during the European Championships this summer, it will be hard to stop Pep Guardiola's side this time around. They also improved defensively last season with the arrival of Ruben Diaz, whose performances alongside John Stones made them one of the most formidable defensive partnerships in the league in recent years. Some might say that City are not the same force that they were in previous seasons, but they still have enough quality and experience to claim another league title. They've also recruited Jack Grealish for a record fee of $100 million and seem likely to add Harry Kane to their squad between now and the end of August, meaning that they have enough strength within that squad to go on and have another successful Premier League campaign. And there you are. Those are my predictions for the upcoming Premier League season 21-22. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Of course, leave any thoughts, comments and feedback on this video or any of the other videos that I've posted. I'm really looking forward to the new season. If you haven't done so already, why not subscribe as well so that you can get notified of all future videos. But until next time, thank you so much for watching and I will see you all soon. Now, in 9th place, it's West Ham, but why? Why are West Ham United going to finish 9th? Well, there were no real expectations amongst the fans last season when discussing West Ham, and so none of us really predicted the season that West Ham would go on to have. They mounted a serious challenge for Champions League football, and it was only in the final stretch of games that their form deserted them, having become one of the favourites to make the top 4 for much of the season. In the end, they finished 6th, which is still a very good season for them. They finished just 2 points behind Chelsea, who finished in 4th on the final day of the season. West Ham will be playing in the Europa League this season, and whilst a lot of people will see it as a step down from the Champions League, there's absolutely no doubt that it was a huge accomplishment for the club to get any kind of European football last season. Now, last season also served as what you might call a resurrection for David Moyes' career, having struggled to find success since his short-lived tenure at Old Trafford, some 7, coming on 8 years ago. And he does deserve a lot, in fact, enormous credit for what he achieved last season. And with the addition of loanee signings like Jesse Lingard last season, it did seem like Moyes was on course to take West Ham into the Champions League. Sadly, for him, it wasn't to be, although this doesn't take anything away from West Ham's campaign last season in the Premier League. But it will be difficult now to balance European and Premier League football this upcoming season, and investment will be needed if West Ham are to have another successful season. But it is unlikely that they will be able to replicate what they did last season, especially with teams above them strengthening in the transfer window. And so a 9th place finish is what West Ham fans can probably expect at the end of this season. Next up, in 8th, it's Arsenal. But why? Why are Arsenal going to finish in 8th? Well, Arsenal, where do you even begin? Where do you begin with this squad? Where do you begin with this team? Where do you begin with this manager? Where do you begin with this club? The jury is still out on Mikel Arteta, and while a lot of fans are still unhappy with the ownership and the way that the club is run, they've got a group of promising young players like Emile Smith-Rowe, Bukayo Saka and Kieran Tierney who play with this enthusiasm, which is a positive, but they also have seasoned players like Willian and Aubameyang who seem to lack that same desire and enthusiasm for the majority of last season, and questions have been asked about Arteta's man management and his ability to deal with more senior players, with many speculating that this has created some kind of division within the dressing room. Of course, it could just be speculation. If that is true, and it carries over from last season, it is likely that Arsenal fans can expect much of the same that they got last season. Now, there may still be small improvements on the pitch, but the transfer activity and the evolution of Arteta as a manager is likely to determine the direction that his players and team and ultimately the club, Arsenal Football Club, take this season. So for me, it's an 8th place finish for Arsenal this season. Next up, in 7th, it's Leeds United. Now, questions have been asked about Bielsa and whether he is able to adapt to different games, with his teams usually playing this fast-paced and aggressive style of football that usually results in the players burning out midway through the season. But Leeds fair play to them. They answered their critics last season, losing just one of the final 11 games, which resulted in them finishing the season in 9th on their return to the top flight of English football. Luke Ayling, Calvin Phillips, Raphinha and Patrick Bamford all had stellar campaigns last season, and they'll be looking to go one better this season. Their first game of the season ended in a 4-3 defeat to Liverpool last year at Anfield, and this time out they faced old rivals Manchester United at Old Trafford, where they lost 6-2 in December of last year. So what better way for them to start the new season than with a win in Manchester at Old Trafford? Leeds will take all their experience and build on the success of last season to find themselves in a Europa League spot come the end of this season when they finish in 7th place. Next up, in 6th, it's Tottenham. But why? Well, the departure of Jose Mourinho just days before last season's League Cup final might have surprised Spurs fans, but for many, well, for most, it was just another in a long line of events at Spurs over the last 2 seasons. Sacking a beloved and progressive manager in Mauricio Pochettino and replacing him with Jose Mourinho might have seemed a no-brainer, an obvious decision, but this was a Jose Mourinho who had been sacked from his previous 2 clubs after causing conflict between himself, the players and the club's hierarchy. But wherever he goes, he wins trophies. That's what you were hearing. But this time, the wheels came off much earlier than anticipated, and after an unconvincing season, which had seen Spurs go to the top of the table for the grand total of 1 week, Daniel Levy pulled the trigger on Mourinho to replace him with interim manager Ryan Mason. And the decisions have left Tottenham fans even more confused with the appointment of Nuno Espirito Santo, who has left the stability of Wolves for what is admittedly a bigger club in Tottenham. But does this decision show a lack of ambition for Spurs, who had established themselves as Champions League regulars and 2018 finalists under Pochettino before failing and falling even further away from League and Champions League contention? There's also the possibility that Harry Kane, their talisman and best player, is to move to Manchester City before the transfer window closes. 160 million is the figure that's been reported on a more regular basis in recent weeks. And could you really see Daniel Levy rejecting that kind of offer should Manchester City and Pep Guardiola come calling? For me, it's a 6th place finish for Spurs this season in the Premier League.